everybody. Welcome to Goddess Matters, hosted on Journey to the Goddess TV. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Annalisa Durr, and here is my
Hello.
other hostess.
Yes, I am your other host, Dr. Andrea Sleminski. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Goddess Matters.
Yes, and today we have a very exciting episode and two very special esteemed guests, Dr. Joey Paynter, and Dr. Tamsin Lee. Hello, both of you. Hello.
Morning.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. So the title of our episode today is The Fire Horse, East-West Astrological Perspectives. And I've just said hello to our guests. And we're going to give a little introduction to both of them before we dive into what's going to be, I'm sure, a fun and dynamic conversation today. So Dr. Tamsin Lee is an East Asian medicine doctor and Daoist metaphysical expert and the founder of Elemental Archetypes. Through Bazi astrology, face reading, and perimenopause soul initiation, she guides clients through powerful life transitions. Her work grounds metaphysics in a way that makes it accessible without diluting its integrity and traditional cultural roots. Wow, exciting. Excited to have you here, Dr. Tamsin.
Thank
You're welcome.
Okay, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Joey Paynter. PhD, LMHC, is a depth psychologist, a licensed therapist, and evolutionary astrologer who bridges the sacred gap between the psyche and the stars. Drawing on her doctoral research and extensive clinical experience, she utilizes mythology and underworld imagery to help clients navigate life's most profound transitions. In addition to her private practice, she provides astrological readings, facilitates an astrology process group, and co-leads a monthly women's mystery circle, fostering spaces for communal ritual and soul discovery. As a core faculty member at the Forest Center for Evolutionary Astrology, Dr. Paynter integrates her Scorpio intensity with her Cancerian empathy to help students understand the psychological dynamics of the client-astrologer relationship. Welcome, Dr. Paynter.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so to kind of start off this morning, we're going to sort of just have a conversation and hopefully it will lead itself, because I think this is going to be a really fascinating discussion. And I kind of was really captured by the idea this year of the Chinese New Year and moving from the year of the snake into the year of the fire horse. And then, of course, there was a lot of information and a lot of chatter about that on social media. And then, of course, there was also a lot of chatter about what people were talking about of moving from Pisces into the age of Aquarius, which I understand isn't quite maybe what's happening. But then again, a lot of this information that we hear, both from archetypal Western and also archetypal Eastern astrology on social media, may not quite be exactly accurate. And so that's what we want to kind of get to the heart of today and really talk about what actually is at the heart of these traditions, what's going on in the as above, so below, and how women can use this knowledge and this information to live better lives and to contribute to the collective, right, as spiritual beings. So who would like to start? Maybe Dr. Tamsin, since we're starting with East-West.
Sure.
Yeah. So maybe you could kind of give us a little overview of I know that's impossible to give a little overview of Chinese astrology, but something just kind of orient us into the subject, if you would.
Yeah, I love that you want to talk about this and you've been picking up on social media, because social media is really interesting. It's you just have 30 seconds to grab someone's attention, right? And so it's hard to share the depth of what's really happening. In Eastern astrology, it really goes back to Taoism and Taoist philosophy. And so Taoists were observers of nature. So a lot of the metaphors that we use, like horse, we're in the year of the horse, the fire horse, they're really metaphors of energy that's really playing, so it's not literally a horse, it's not literally a fire, but it's that big fire and how we as individuals feel. And that varies too. Some people love intense heat and the big fire at the peak of, in the middle of the afternoon. Other people find it exhausting and tiring. So I think that's the basis of understanding metaphysics is that you have to understand it in a more conceptual way, but then also take it back to understanding how does it feel in your body. And so how does that energy play out in your body? And we have 5 elements. Well, before we go into that, it all goes down to the simple concept of yin and yang, that everything can be broken down to these. And we hear yin and yang all the time. We see the Tai Chi symbol, the little swirly thing with the black and white. But it is a beautiful concept that is simple but quite complex. And there are tenements to yin and yang. They're opposing factors. Light and dark is an example. But one can't exist without the other. So we can't have light without dark. And we wouldn't even know what daytime would look like if we didn't have nighttime to compare it to. The other thing is they're interdependent, and then they mutually transform into one another. And that's really the basis of Eastern astrology, that we work with these energies that are neutral, but all energy is trying to do is just balance and harmonize itself. And so we put labels onto that. When something challenging happens, we can say, oh, that was really difficult. That was really hard. But what energy is just trying to do is just balance it out. So even something simple like war is devastating, and a lot of tragedies happen post-war. But again, it's just energy trying to balance itself out and harmonize. And then we also have the 5 elements, which is fire, metal, earth, water, wood, and they're broken down in seasons. And in Chinese medicine, we use them to represent different types of organs, and then we use them astrologically too. So we're right now in the wood season, which is spring. And I can go on and on about it. And then we have all the 12 zodiac animals and then different types of energies. But I hope that gives like a basic foundation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. It's a really good sort of resetting of ideas, I think, from what those of us who are not schooled in your specialty or your perspective, right? What do you think, Joey? How does your practice relate to either the ideas of misconceptions, or in a sense kind of the way you work with energy, or the way your practice works with energy?
Yeah, well, I really appreciated what Dr. Tamsin said about how, you might have the elements, right? And it might be a lot of fire, and someone may not be oriented towards that. They may have a reaction that's like, I don't want to be so out there in it. They may be exhausted from it. I really appreciate that sort of kind of the response to it, right? How there's an individual, how we are wired and how we interact. So I do evolutionary astrology. Evolutionary astrology is the idea that our souls have reincarnated from lifetime to lifetime. And there's this karmic blueprint that we have, and we've come into this lifetime, and it's saying, oh, where did I get stuck before? Where did my soul not get to evolve, right? What are the patterns? What are the themes? And those themes and patterns, they follow us, right? So we may find ourselves in a similar thing and we're stuck and we're like, how am I here? What is going on? And our charts kind of hold sort of the key and the mystery to our strengths, to our weaknesses, to our stuckness. But it also holds the medicine, right? And it lets us know, what do we need to lean into? And so, especially as we're talking about the fire horse, I love it, because we're moving right now into a lot of this. There's a lot of fire energy and a lot of air energy that's coming up with where the planets are shifting. And so we've been in some, Jupiter's been in Cancer. We've been sort of in this sort of watery, kind of healing energy. Obviously last year, the year of the snake, right? It's like the removal. I think people are kind of like, I'm ready for something different, right? I've done enough shedding. And I think astrology also speaks to that. That's, the different planetary placements. They talk about a shedding, a transformation, a release. And we're this year in a huge sort of shift, because the planets are shifting into more of the air signs, some fire signs. And I think it's kind of paralleling this sort of what's happening with the shift from this year of the snake into the year of the fire horse.
Awesome.
So go ahead, Annalisa, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about how there's this, it's interesting how Chinese astrology has animals, right? That it uses animals to represent the years. And what I didn't understand that became clear this year when people started talking about the fire horse is that there's elemental aspects too. And so even though there's what, 12 zodiac signs, right? It actually it's not going to be the fire horse 12 years ago or 13 years ago because so that it's like cycles within cycles within cycles. So that's one something I'd love for you to talk about, Dr. Tamsin, or touch on or explain the significance. And then, the second thing that occurred to me is that I don't, the animals aren't so, it doesn't seem they're so prevalent in Western astrology, Dr. Joey. And so I'm wondering maybe like, what is the conversation to be had there between Western and Eastern astrology due to the fact that there's a lot of focus on elementals, I think in both, maybe elementals, but not so much the animals in Western astrology. So I have two different questions for you, or two different, aspects to expand on. So please, maybe Dr. Tamsin, you can start.
Yeah. Well, the animals itself also represent different types of elements too. So the horse is yang fire. And before the element, there's yin and yang too. So we have yang fire, yin fire. And then we have something, if you look at your Bazi chart, which is your natal chart, you'll see the top row, which is the heavenly stem, we call that. And then that itself has an element, and it's either yin or yang element. So this year, we're in yang fire element with the horse, which has yang fire already in it. And that makes a difference, little fire versus big fire, right? And it goes the same way with wood and water and earth. The reason why this year is so intense, it's because it's all yang fire. That's an excessive amount of heat. And yang is, I would love to talk more about this. I think we're going to go into it later, but the misconception of how we address yin and yang as feminine and masculine, because it's deeper than that. And also, I don't even know what these words mean now. We are seeing a cultural shift of what feminine energy looks like and what masculine energy looks like. But that is one of the themes that we're being introduced because of this yang fire horse energy. And so, when you look at, we use nature as a metaphor, yang fire, like I said, it's the big heat, whereas yin fire, last year was the snake. So snake itself, its own element is yin fire. And you can, when I say that, like, just take a moment to connect with your body and see what that feels like. Yin fire is candlelights, starlights, campfires. It's still heat, but it's a different type of heat that draws us in. And last year was yin wood, and that's vines, that's flowers. It's all about beauty and collectivism, and there's a softness to that wood as opposed to something like yang wood, which is like redwood forest, huge trees or bamboos. So we have these subtle layers. So it's when we see things on social media, it's a very stripped down version of what really we're looking at when we look at a chart. And when I look at a chart, I'm trying to see what the energy actually moves within the chart, because that's what you're reading, and how that plays out with what's happening in the year.
So I have a little question off of that. So in the Chinese astrology, thinking about the natal chart and all the different layers and the different ways that the energy moves within the individual's life, does the working with the Chinese astrology, is it, for lack of a better way of expressing it, is it a more personal sort of how the fire horse is going to affect you, or is there also what we see in social media, which is like the broad influence of this particular year?
Yes, both. You nailed it. It is. We're all going to experience yang fire horse because that's the year. But there is this other pillar that looks at that's based on your Batsa chart. So we will have yang fire horse. Everyone's going to experience that. So everyone's going to be experiencing this momentum, this freedom, this wanting to take action. A more of a masculine energy. But then underneath it, we have something called the hidden stems. And and we also call them 10 gods. It's a different type of energy and metaphor. And those things are very specific to your natal chart. So we look at that fire horse and then we see, okay, what's your natal chart showing? And so we each all have individual energies to work with. So I kind of think of it as layers. You know, you have this collective energy that we're all experiencing, and we have this individual, very personal layer of energy. And just like Dr. Joey said about your birth chart and karma, there's a karmic influence with Eastern astrology as well. We believe that we literally come from the stars and we choose when we want to be born. So the energy that we get to work with in our natal chart, at one point in our lives, we chose that. And I like to think that we were smarter back then than we are now. We may not know why we chose that energy, but we did, and we have to work with it. Life will continuously give you opportunities to work through this.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Can you restate the question for Dr. Joey? Because I don't remember where you started, Annalise.
Well, I think that you can maybe respond, or from maybe either respond to exactly what Dr. Tamsin said, or how does Western astrology also pick up on some of those same themes, both the collective and the individual. And also I had asked you about the animal figures, where they kind of factor in Western astrology. So any of that feels appropriate. Yeah,
there's a lot in there, but I did want to say, just kind of in fun to Dr. Tamsin's statement about, we chose our birth chart, and I agree with that. I think we did. And sometimes I will have moments where I'll say, who thought this chart was a good idea? I will start. Sometimes I love it. I love my chart. I love who I am. And then other times I just think, this is crazy. Who thought this was a good idea, right? But I do agree. Yeah, I think there was sort of either co-conspiring with the universe or co-creating, and this was sort of, the karma has ripened. And so in this incarnation, I'm ready to tackle these things, right? I just had to add that part in there. In terms of the personal and the collective, what I would say is, in a chart, we can see the collective influences that are happening, right? So right now we've got, Uranus is getting ready to move into Gemini. We briefly experienced that last year. We've got Saturn and Neptune both in Aries, right? And how that's influencing the collective. We've got Pluto that moved into Aquarius in I think it's November of 24, right? So there's these collective things that are happening globally, everywhere. But then also there's an impact that happens personally based on where is it happening in your chart, right? Where is it happening? What house is it happening? How is it impacting your natal chart, which is you, right? What are the triggering points, which makes it a really personal process, right? And so the collective is made up of individuals, right? So it's sort of this idea of, we look at what's happening to us individually, and then there's a collective movement that can also be seen sort of through the planets and their movements and triggerings. And I do less work with the collective piece. I do more of the personal, like, what is happening to you? What are you moving through? What are you trying to transform? What cycle are you going through? So that's kind of, I think the astrology is used for both the collective and the personal. I just focus more on, I've got so much Scorpio. I'm so interested in, how are you transforming? How are you going into the depths, right? What has been hidden? What are you bringing forward? As far as the elements goes, we have obviously, the earth, fire, air, water, all of that. And typically the fire and air is known as the more of the masculine, I guess we could say. Although I agree with Dr. Tamsin, like, it starts to blur in my mind. I'm like, are we really talking about masculine and feminine? Like, there's a crossover here. And then earth and water tend to be more seen as the feminine. And what we're coming up in this year is a lot of air energy and a lot of fire energy. So there's a lot of, we could call it masculine energy. I might argue that in some ways, but we might call it that. It's this kind of outwardly assertion, penetrating, aggressive, kind of like force energy. However, here's the catch. The planets can be sort of identified as, some can be seen as masculine, some as feminine. So you can have like a Mars, right? You can have a masculine seeming planet, and we're talking about energy, but it could be in Pisces, a water sign, which is more receptive and feminine. So you're sort of dealing with both energies. And here's the thing, in our charts, we have a Mars and a Venus and a Neptune and a Pluto and a Saturn, right? And so there's this idea we have all of this energy that's available to us, and it's kind of starts to blur, I think, a lot of times. So I don't know if that answers sort of the spaces of where we're going.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been having this discussion about the idea of masculine, feminine, the archetypal masculine, the archetypal feminine.
Mm-hmm.
What is gender? Where are the where are the lines blurring? Where are we going, right? And some people have started thinking about the terms, and it's kind of a Jungian thing a little bit, maybe a Hegelian thing, I don't know, but I'm saying active and receptive, right? Energy is being active and receptive.
Yeah.
And they still have the underlying connotative, right, link to the words masculine and feminine. But I really think that as the zeitgeist moves forward, as culture moves forward, as millennials, Gen X, Gen Z come forward, I really think it's going to be their decisions on how to rename these energies, in a sense, because they're the ones who are going to be carrying it forward. But for us, trying to use some terminology that's not going to have so much baggage, right, attached to it, right, is sometimes difficult. But
Well, it's interesting. So Uranus has been moving through Taurus for the last 7, 8 years. And I think part of that we have seen in sort of in our culture in the last 8 years has been this sort of shift around gender and sort of maybe non-binary, or kind of the pronouns that we use. And I think Uranus coming in is sort of saying it's shifting things up around that sense of the body and how we identify. And it's been a kind of a shakeup, and people that don't want that shakeup and that change resist it and react to it, right? But I think as we're kind of in the last degrees of it, we're sort of seeing more of this. Well, what are we talking about here when we talk about gender and energy? I think that's part of what Uranus has been doing and shaking things up. One of the many.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
How do you perceive that, Dr. Tamsin?
I was kind
of get into that a little bit, so go for it.
This is so fascinating hearing Dr. Joey's perspective on tropical astrology, because it's like there are similarities, it's two different systems, but I'm like, oh my gosh, we have that Uranus Taurus. I don't know what that means, but I know in Eastern astrology we have something called period 9. And these periods are 20-year transits that happen collectively. And so what we're seeing in this period 9 energy, and period 9, the archetype of it is an older, mature woman. I like to call it like the rich auntie, the fabulous rich auntie. And so here's this rich auntie. Oh, and period 8 was actually the adolescent boy. And so on period 8, 20 years ago, we saw the rise of very adolescent boy things like video games, startup culture, billionaire boys, all these things that are, and even when you look at beauty, it was very much in the eyes of a young man, like how women's beauty standards were, this very voluptuous, almost unattainable type of beauty. And so we're shifting into period 9, and it's still early on. So what we're seeing is this dynamic of push and pull. We have some groups of people wanting to move forward into a era where we don't know what it looks like. We don't know what the world is going to look like, but it's got to be better than what we have now. And then this other group of people wanting to hold back into tradition and coming back and going really backwards, to that old way of living and thinking. So we're going to continuously see this push and pull dynamic. And feminine and masculine energy, gender roles, these are the two obvious things to really figure out how society moves forward.
You know,
fascinating that I'm sorry, just one thing. I'm sorry, Annalisa. She just
it's okay.
is that the whole idea of period 9 and the rise of the mature, fabulous auntie is everything that I wrote my dissertation on, which is the emergence of a new life stage for women, which I call regency, right? Which is, and I know you work with women in perimenopause, and so it's that time from about 45 to 70 when we're not the house when we're coming out of householder, and hormones and culture are changing, our expectations, our self-image is changing as we look back a little bit more on ourselves and recreating ourselves. And so there's this whole new sort of life stage that is really, boomer women were the first women in the history of humanity to sort of live into menopause as a generational cohort, not as individuals, but as a generational cohort. So it's fascinating to me that we're in period 9 during the rise of regency. I think that's crazy awesome.
Yeah, and in Eastern metaphysics, we have something. The menopause era is called second spring,
Yeah.
and I love that your dissertation was regency. And it's the first time I was thinking. I'm 45, so I'm going through my perimenopause. But when I was younger, I never saw older women in magazines or living how they were, and now when you look at social media, some of the biggest content creators are women in their 60s and 70s looking fabulous. And what I love about it is there's no one way to age. They're showing us you can age with gray hair, you can age with dyeing your hair, you can age wearing whatever you want, and that again is because of this period 9 energy. It's this and the fire horse is just going to accelerate that.
I do have a question for you, Dr. Tamsin, but first I wanted to see if you want to respond to that, Dr. Joey, if you have anything to add to that conversation.
Well, I don't know that this is even astrological piece to it, but there's something about this imagery that Dr. Tams is talking about when we were younger, right? And there wasn't any sort of images reflecting sort of age, right? Getting older in that sense. And I think it brings about this idea of when we think the word that often gets used is crone, and how I think it's like it's time to really update that. It's like time to say, like, that doesn't sound like something I want to move into, right? I don't know that I want to move into my crone. I mean, the idea of what crone represents, maybe like wisdom and what I've gathered, but I think some of the imagery, it's outdated. And it's time to sort of replace and see, like, no, I'm entering into my own it era, or whatever you want to call it, into the magic era, into I don't know, maybe Dr. A, you've got a better image or word for
Yeah,
it, but
well, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing is, and going back to the research and my dissertation work, is that, it was in the 1940s and 50s with the uptick in metaphysical thinking and writing, and that maiden mother crone really became so popular, right? And that the triple goddess was brought forward from antiquity and refashioned, basically. um and So in my work, I'm like, we're no longer in a triple form. We're in 1900, statistically, white women were dead by 55 and women of color by 43. So we have another 20 to 30 years. So basically, I say we're maiden householder, because from 18 to 45, women do a lot of things. They start their own home, they start their careers, some have partners, some have families, some live alternative lifestyles, some are dedicated to the career, whatever it is, right? Then regency, then wise woman, right? Because crone, even though etymologically and historically and mythologically it's a powerful term, it doesn't resonate right in the zeitgeist. It just doesn't resonate.
Right.
And so to me, regency's 45 to 70 plus or minus. You look at somebody like Jane Fonda, she has 1 foot in regency and 1 foot in wise woman. She's 88. Right. She still chooses to be involved in the collective. Other women decide to step into their wise woman years at 65 and retire and stay home and have beautiful gardens and take care of their grandchildren, and that's what they want to do. And so it's sort of, I think regency is important because we hold the throne for our wise woman to come that emerges from within us. And in history, a regent was someone who held the throne until that person, girl or boy, who was underage, grew up enough to claim the throne. So yeah, so I agree with you. You know, it's crone does not resonate, and I think wise woman's good, and I think we get to choose when we move from activity into
I think I want to add to that. I think I want to say I want it not to just be, I want it to be like badass wise woman. There's something I want to add to that, you know, not just like I've got this, but like also I like there's this sort of like I don't know, it's like almost like transforming the rage that I think is in there and being like I own this, like I claim it. So badass works for me.
Regency, baby, claim your sovereignty. Claim your sovereignty.
Well, there's something interesting too. I think we've touched on this before, Andrea, that there's an extension of the householder years or the mothering years, right? Where many women now are becoming mothers later in life. So it begs the question, is there a merging of the regency and the motherhood, or a bringing of the wisdom of the regency archetype into motherhood for women that are in, you know, choosing motherhood later in life after they have established careers, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think a lot of boundaries are blurring, you know. I mean, I think in you know, I chose householder. It comes from the Eastern tradition, right? That term, just because I felt it was more inclusive of all women, because there are a lot of women now, you know, if we can believe social media, that you know, are choosing a single life, that are choosing not to have families, that are choosing to focus on themselves and their dreams and what it is they want to do. And so yeah, I mean, midlife, nobody can agree. They couldn't agree 15 years ago, and they don't agree now on when midlife starts and ends. Not psychologists, psychotherapists, sociologists. Everybody agrees that they can't agree because everything is shifting, right? And so so you know, that time for many women is when women are having children in their late 40s, you know, or mid 40s, right? And they're deciding to start their families then. So yeah, I think it's kind of like going back to what Dr. Tamsin said, like we got to look at each individual person's dynamic life to see how the choices that they make and the energies that influence their lives, right, are connected to how their wisdom manifests, how their path manifests, and then looking at as above, so below, how, you know, bringing it back to what we're talking about, how what's happening in the zodiac, in the cosmos, in the greater energy fields, can either aid or confound, right? Those kinds of choices, right?
Yeah, and with what you're saying with that, if I can add, it's I just talked about, you know, we have Uranus has been going through Taurus, but we're in April 25th, it's going to shift into Gemini. And I love this phrase. I love saying this to clients. I love talking about it, but get ready for everything that you think to realize you're wrong. Like it's sort of this undoing. It's like it's going to open us up into see new narratives and new ways of looking at things, but it's going to strip away the things we've been attached to of what we think we know about it, right? And it's like an undoing, but it's an undoing that aligns us with more freedom and who we are and being authentic. And I think some of this undoing is around, like, it could be around women's things such as perimenopause, menopause, how we see this sort of aging process go. I mean, I think that's part of the story too. Like, there's this narrative that's going to be you know, so be ready to be wrong about everything you think you know.
and so if you're a person like me who has their sun in Gemini, it's going to be even more intensified.
Well, get ready for a lot of, you're about to have a lot of change. If you've got Gemini energy, Uranus is coming in, you're going to see there's like shifts and changes. It's like, get ready for the ride. Like if you're open to it, you're going to just feel like, oh my gosh, there's more alignment, you know, to who I am. If you're resistant to it, it's like, what is all of this change? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, amazing. Okay, I do have a question I've been wanting to ask you, Dr. Tamsin, and we've already touched lightly on it. So we're going to move slightly in a different direction, maybe. We'll see. And on, so when I saw you speak on the astrology podcast, I believe it was called, yep. You spoke about really you were like deconstructing this idea of what feminine means and feminine, like, so you were talking about yin fire or excuse me, yin power and yang power, and just looking at the difference that both masculine and feminine essentially can be qualified or characterized as powerful, but there's just different qualities to that. So I wonder if you can speak to that, the difference between yin power and yang power.
Yeah. Um, my chart is very masculine. I think tropical astrology is also is a very masculine chart too. And so it came from my own journey of trying to connect with my feminine energy. And I've always been resistant to the feminine energy because it felt weak to me, nurturing, nourishing, and that also shows up in my chart that I am like that, but it's something that I completely resist because I've seen so many women in my life give up their identity and to nurturing, a man, children, other people. And so I took a step back and I'm like, what is yin and yang energy? What is the masculine femininity? And how can I reframe feminine energy into this really powerful energy? And I looked back in what happens when a woman is pregnant. We say that that's a very yin time. She's containing a child in her body, and everything she eats, all the emotions, everything she does goes to nourish this child in her body. So it's a yin time, and you often see the pregnancy glow. Their hair looks great, their skin starts to look great, and that is very yin. She looks like a goddess. And then during that time, she's very receptive, she's intuitive, she's listening, and she's so connected to her body. But when she gives birth and there's this output energy, it's a very yang energy that's happening. I mean, she's screaming. There's blood everywhere. It's not a very soft type of action. And so in that moment, you can see that yin transform into yang. And then I also see the relationship between the mother and father. In Eastern culture, after the birth, the mother and baby is supposed to stay inside for 40 days. And everyone just takes care of them because she has lost a lot of her, what we call chi, blood, Jing, and these are essences, part of the body. And so she needs to rebuild that. And so there are specific foods to eat and different types of self-care practices. And everyone just takes care of, and she's supposed to sleep, so everyone takes care of the baby while she just nourishes and replenishes herself. But in that time, what the father is supposed to do is he now becomes the yin energy. Everything he does is to protect that child and mother, nourish that mother and child, make sure that they're okay. And that flip between yang to yin for that man to shift into, I think that's such a beautiful interplay of what yin and yang energy is. And I think that's what's missing in Western culture. And that's why men have a disconnection with their child, or they don't know what their role is once that child enters. There isn't that safe space where this energy transforms. And so, and also I think of in nature, you don't want to mess with a mama bear. If you see a cub, there's a mama bear nearby, and she's not going to be very yin-like. She's going to be very masculine. And so when I think of it in that way, I forget, someone mentioned of different terms. I'm trying to think of it more. It makes more sense to me when I would just say yin and yang. Yin is receptivity, intuition, nourishment, listening, going inwards, subtle things that maybe we can't see. And yang is action, structure, direction, assertion, and outward expression. I hope that makes sense. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think also this interesting point of how these energies both of them live inside of us, and it's interesting to hear how traditional Chinese culture or maybe Asian cultures more broadly have created have created society in a way that allows for people to kind of take on those different or embody those different energies at different times, depending on what their role is at that particular time in their life or in their relationships. I think that's really interesting and
Mm.
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you see those kinds of differences in either masculine, feminine, active, receptive, in terms of your work, Joey?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's very similar, actually. I think there's a lot of crossover. We talk about, I said the water elements and the earth elements are kind of seen as the more receptive, the nurturing, the intuitive, and I guess we associate that more with the feminine, right? But then you've got the fire and the air, which is associated more with the masculine energies. And so, but we have all of it in us. Like the chart contains everything. So the idea isn't, it's kind of like the balancing, like that Dr. Tamsin's talking about. It's like, what am I needing right now? And where is there this transfer, and maybe it happens within, maybe it happens with another, but it's this, what am I lacking? What do I need more of? What do I need to respond to? Also, what's happening in the planets? Where are they at, and what are they sort of throwing at me, and how am I reacting to it based on who I am, right? So like I said, there's a lot of shifts right now that are moving towards a lot of air energy and a lot of fire energy. Well, some of us are going to love it. We're going to thrive in that, right? And others of us are going to be like, that's a lot. I kind of want to tuck in. And it might be looking at, well, what happens when the part of us that wants to be receptive is now needing to be more assertive? Or more outward focused. And so there might be that transfer that Dr. Tamsin so beautifully put in terms of when, a woman is giving birth, and how then the male comes in, and then that energy sort of transfers in these different roles. I think that happens within us too. Does that make sense how I'm saying that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to read Zeph's comment really quickly because I think it also speaks to this moment. He says, it seems as if all things return to a balance, which I see a reflection of androgyny, the perfect synthesis of yin and yang. Thank you, Zeph.
And what's interesting is often, and some astrologers may disagree with this, but that the planet Uranus and Mercury are kind of seen as more androgynous sort of planets, where they're not this or that. They kind of, especially Uranus, is more non-conforming. It's like, don't put me here, don't put me there. And it's about shifting and changes. So, and there's a big shift right now with Uranus going into Gemini. I think we're going to have these new ideas kind of come forward.
Wow.
I think that's interesting. Coming off of Zeph's comment and thinking about what we've been talking about. In Jungian psychology, anyway, the perfect balance between the male and the female is called the hieros gamos, right? In like an alchemical term, where it's the blending of the masculine and the feminine together that creates a third, right? That creates a third union, and it's beyond the duality of the two. So, and I don't know if that is androgynous or if it is something. If it's something new. Like I think about what Dr. Tamsin said about looking at like the animal energies, and what Joey's talking about, the planetary energies. And when if we look at nature and we see ourselves as a part of nature, all animals are male and female, right? Even some plants are male and female, right? In terms of how the structure of nature continues. And it's interesting that it's just interesting to see the shift that's happening in the human psyche that's taking gender beyond the male and female. But when I look back at the earth itself, it seems like we're rooted in that world. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can talk about an Eastern philosophy. It goes backwards. Before yin and yang, there's this concept that we all come from one wholeness, and that is what splits yin and yang. And yin and yang splits into what we call three treasures, which is qi, jing, and blood. And that's what makes us. And so our whole point of using metaphysics is to return to the wholeness of who we all are, to that oneness, and so it makes sense that these energies play out. And gender, I think it's just another tool to just keep us divided and keep us disconnected from this wholeness, to that we, on a visceral level, we all understand. It doesn't matter what religion or what culture you come from. You get this feeling, this memory of like, I think there's something bigger. I think that there's something that connects us all. And gender, race, ethnicity, all these things is just to keep us more disconnected to that relationship, to something bigger.
Yeah.
I've been itching to talk about Eris. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the mythic figure Eris and how that plays out, but she's known as the goddess of discord and strife, right? There was the main story that I know about her, you guys might be familiar as well, but there was this wedding that was happening. All the goddesses and gods were invited to it except Eris. She was uninvited. She didn't get a bid to the wedding because she was supposedly ugly, right? So she didn't get to come. Well, that pissed her off. It made her really angry, rageful. And she's just like, you're not going to invite me? All right. So she took this golden apple and she throws it into the center of the aisle. And it's kind of the idea of who's the fairest of them all. And so you have Aphrodite, Hera, and Athena fighting over who's the fairest of them all, to the point where they can't figure out who wins. So they bring in Paris. And they're like, okay, who are you going to pick? So Athena's like, I will give you wisdom. Hera's like, I will give you power. And Aphrodite's like, I'll give you Helen of Sparta. And so Paris is like, that's what I want. And so it leads to, Helen of Troy, the Trojan War, right? So here's this idea that we have these uninvited parts, right? And I think this is both personal and collective. And what have we not invited to the party? What has been completely discarded, left out? And where is there some rage? And Eris is coming in and she's like, she is pissed. Like, it's about wholeness, right? I don't just want these presentable parts. I want all of it to be there. And so Eris is in a really prominent position right now. Eris is in Aries. But what's interesting is Chiron is next to Eris right now. So while there's all this rage and sort of, she doesn't care about healing. The mythic figure doesn't care about healing. She's about, I want to show you what's there, what's been hidden, what's been uninvited, and I want to bring it to the table. And it may start wars, discord, strife, but the idea is it's also about creating a sense of wholeness. With Chiron's presence next to it, it's about healing. So we're bringing the uninvited parts in for this sense of healing. And this is very activated right now. I mean, it's a very collective piece. And I think it ties into what we're talking about, right? These uninvited parts, or this idea of what's not been welcome, what's been separated, what's been left out, and how there's sort of this idea of needing to see it all.
It's so fascinating because that makes me think of the fairy tale, right, of Sleeping Beauty and where the 13th fairy is not invited to the wedding. She also gets furious, and what does she do? She makes everybody fall asleep. She makes everybody fall asleep. Right. And so, it's not until there's an active energy that fights its way through the brambles and the briars that surround the situation, right? All of the discord that surrounds the situation, that there can be an awakening, that there's an active energy toward awakening in the tail. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm sorry, Dr. Tamsin, did you want to say something?
Well, I wanted to I wanted to relate it back to the year of the fire horse, because that's something that I've been telling my clients, that everything you've been ignoring, purposely, consciously, and unconsciously, it is going to be exposed. So get ready. Hope you did all the shedding last year. Get a great therapist. Take care of yourself. And I'm already seeing that in my own life. And I love the story. I've never heard of this story, Dr. Joy, about Aries. And I'm realizing, as I'm seeing parts of myself that I've ignored, it feels icky. I feel gross about, I can't believe I did that. There's a lot of shame and guilt and just, ew, I don't want to think about it, but it just keeps appearing. And this isn't a very eloquent way of saying, describing fire horse energy, but I can't think of any other way. And I haven't shared this. So here's my first time sharing this. But the way that I think of fire horse energy is, if you've ever, I'm from New York. And so, rodents is a big thing wherever you live in New York. And it reminds me of going into a kitchen and turning on the lights and you see the cockroaches just, whew. So the light is on. You've already seen it, and now you have to do something about it. And that's what I feel like fire horse energy is going to bring. We're going to finally see all of our icky stuff, and we have no choice but now to do something about it.
Yeah, you're like me. You go get the frying pan and you start
I would see
hitting the cockroaches.
I would move. And now, I'd be like, that's it. I'm done.
That's where I draw the line. I got to move.
Oh my God. Dr. Joey, do you have any? Please feel free to respond if you'd like.
I mean, I just am resonating with this idea, with what you're telling your clients, right? Like this idea of like, get ready. Like there's going to be these feelings that come up that you're not going to like, but I love the phrase, it's time to do something about it. I feel like that's also kind of in the Western astrology. I think that's happening too. There's a with Saturn and Neptune and Aries right now, there's a dissolving of structures, but it's in Aries. So it's sort of like the courage to do something about it is kind of also a similar thing. And it might be confusing and disorienting at the same time, because it's dissolving pieces. And then it's like, well, now I got to push something forward, and I have to actually act, get the courage even to act on it. So that really resonates what you're saying, Dr. Tamsin. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, I'm just thinking about how there's a conversation happening in the collective about the rise of the feminine. That's been happening actually for a long time. It's not something new, at least for the last couple of decades, if not century or so. But I'm thinking about some of these Hindu goddesses, especially the ones that come to my mind, like Kali, that represents the fire and the destruction, and Durga. And so I wonder if even though I think, if I remember correctly, Dr. Tamsin, you were describing the fire horse as more of a young fire, if there is some relationship between these really fiery, destructive goddesses and their energy also being a part of, maybe we can relate it to this fire horse energy, or these Western planets that also represent fire and air.
Yeah, one goddess archetype that I work with, it's funny because we did a card pulling before our meeting and we got Guan Yin, right? Which is, everyone knows her. She's the goddess of compassion and the mother. And I never really resonated with her. So I thought it was interesting that was the card that got pulled. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, because it's all about nurturing. I'm like, oh gosh, here she comes again, like reminding me it's a powerful energy. But one goddess that I've been working with she's less known, but her name is Shi Wang Mu. In Chinese, and there's different variations, but she's known as the Queen Mother of the West, and she is she's the goddess of underworld. And Dr. Joey, like you said, you have Scorpio energy. I have Scorpio energy. So that's why I was like, yes, goddess, underworld. She's the dark goddess. And she is like a psychopomp. She brings you down to the underworld for you to really get to know what we say the hungry ghosts. And these are they're more than shadows. There are actually different types of hungry ghosts. And if you look in Buddhist kind of paintings, you'll see these images of these beings where they have a very skinny neck and a big mouth and a big belly. And the whole idea is that they're constantly hungry, and whatever you feed them, they'll never be satiated. So you have to work with them and befriend them and listen to them. They're telling you some messages of, these are things you're ignoring. I see it like as a scare child. They're very loud and they're scary, but you just need to say, you need a snack? You need a nap? Like, hey, buddy. So she is this fierce older woman archetype too. And so I think that is the the relationship. And also going back to what we were talking about, the old crone, I was surprised that both of you didn't resonate with the old crone, because I've talked about this in social media and I get such heat from saying I never resonated with the old crone. And now that I'm getting older, I really don't want to work with that energy. But in Eastern culture, we have a different archetype, and we transform into the white tigress.
Oh,
I got shivers.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Every time I mention this, people are like, I want to be the crone. I'm like, okay, fine, good for you. But me, no. I feel like I'm going to become fabulous when I'm 70 and 80. And I've always known that I think my prime is later in my years. And so I've always resonated with the white tigress. And it's this, white tigers in Korean culture. We have a lot of, I'm Korean, so we have a lot of mythologies around the tiger. And the white tiger it's the idea is that it's reached enlightenment. And so they turn white. And white has a lot to do with the metal element of letting go and surrendering and having really internal wisdom. So I think those are the two archetypes that I personally am working through in the yang fire horse energy. And they represent another aspect of that, what we say cools down the fire.
Ooh.
I really like that, Dr. Tamsin. I think I want the white tigress as well over the crone.
You're like, I'll take that.
I think I will bring that imagery in. That is much more like it sounds more empowering than sort of the other image feels more withering, and this feels more like the vitality to it. I like that.
Yeah, you see the white tiger in the jungle. She is out there, and you can't, she's not camouflaged. And the other story about Korean mythology, the way that our story origin starts is that there's a story with the tiger and the bear of how Buddha said, if you stay in the cave and you eat mugwort for 100 days, you can become human. So the bear stays in the cave and eats the mugwort for 100 days. The tiger stayed for 3 days, and they're like, no, I'm out. And then they're like, I'm good. I don't want to do this. And so it's, we have two animals that represent us. We say the bear is the mother of Korea, but the tiger is embedded in a lot of paintings and mythologies and stories. And if you remember back in the Olympics in the 80s, the tiger was the mascot. So I love that the tiger also has this rebellious story that I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to go and be wild and roam the jungles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think we go from regent to wise woman to white tigress. That's
Wow.
awesome. I love that imagery. That's so powerful.
Mm.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, that is really. I just saw like a little short video clip on the difference between lions and tigers, and like, okay, it was a little clickbaity, and it was like, why don't lions typically attack humans, but tigers wouldn't have a problem attacking humans? But the whole idea was that lions are very social and they spend time together in their packs, and maybe there's the matriarchal element there too. I don't know. And if they grow up with human caretakers, they tend to see them more as like me, like family, whereas the tigers are out, they're lone rangers or whatever, and they don't have that kind of, I don't know, human relational bond that they're capable of with humans, allegedly. And so I'm wondering if there's something about the sovereignty of the tiger that maybe, I don't know. I'm just trying to relate that idea of why a tigress.
It's interesting that you're talking about tiger, because there is a relationship with the horse, tiger, and dog. They form a triad, and and each of the animals form a triad with one another. And those triad energies, when they come together, it's like they work well together. And we talked about courage. And I've been really thinking about the difference between courage and bravery, because I think there's a little difference. And I think the horse represents bravery. It's this instinct of like, I'm going. There's no conscious thought. It's embedded in their character. And I think that has a lot to do with what we're being confronted in the year of the horse, that it has to be part of your character. And bravery is another character trait that the tiger has. Also pride and ego and confidence. And they are like the lone. If you know any friends who have tiger in their Batsa chart, they probably present somewhat like this. But then we also have a clash energy, and the clash of the horse is the rat. And rat is where I see courage. Courage is this, my Buddhist teacher always says, courage is, it's what happens when you're afraid, but you still do it anyways.
Do it anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And so those two actions of bravery and courage are two things that we have to confront this year, like this instinct of, this is wrong, and I have to speak out about this. And then also, this is wrong, I'm scared to speak out, but I'm going to speak out.
That's great wisdom for this year. We need that. We need to internalize that.
Yeah, we're seeing this. People do this all the time, and I see it in social media. I see people being very courageous and very, very brave. Minnesota is an example of how that city embodies both energies.
Do you see courage and bravery as coming through the evolutionary astrology?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's happening with the Saturn and Neptune in Aries right now. I think there is a dissolving of these structures, kind of as we're seeing the boundaries are being in question, where things have been like, this is where something is, and now it's sort of pushing back against. I think where there has been lies and deception, there's also sort of this holding to truth, and it's the courage to speak up, it's the courage to say. So, I mean, I think the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is a lot of this. And it's sort of a restructuring, and it's going to take courage and bravery, right? It's going to take this idea of pushing something forward and claiming something where there's parts of, whether you could say the parts of the self or parts of the collective or structures are needing to kind of, they're not holding us anymore. And so truth is needing to come in to say, what's the new container, right? What is the container we need? And that's taking a lot of that's a lot of courage and a lot of bravery in it. So yeah, absolutely.
I think this show itself is representative of it. I was thinking today, I was like, I can't believe I'm going to be sitting with other doctors and talking about this stuff, metaphysics and astrology. And I would never think that, because academia is academia, doctor is doctor, right? And then being able to talk about these things in this sort of setting is so unusual, and it's something that I've always wanted to do, but it really is a representation of how time is changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Annalisa, your video has frozen. But yeah, I'm just gonna carry on with what you said. Yeah, I mean, to look at coming together, right, in a situation like this where we can, bring all of our expertise and actually try to talk about some of these things in terms and ways that we can see how it's affecting, right, our world, how women can look at these changes, whether they take it from an archetypal evolutionary perspective, welcome back, or whether they take it from an Eastern perspective, whichever way they're attracted to, or both and, right? That being able to sit here and talk about these things not in a meme, right? Not in an overview, but actually to give a little bit more context, right? To say, okay, let's look at what's really happening here, and how can we use this, if for nothing else than to have the courage, right, and the bravery to live our life, to live our destiny, to do what it is we're here to do.
Awesome.
I'm sure we're wrapping up. I wanted to say this one last thing. I think what's interesting right now too is there's a lot of planets in Pisces right now, which is very much sort of this kind of like, it's almost like, I almost want to say it's like the calm before the storm, but there's a little bit of reorienting that's happening right now. Maybe it's like the intuition, tapping in, dreams, because Mercury is retrograde in Pisces, might be returning back to some ideas, some relationships. It's going a little back. March 20th, though, is when we kick off the real sort of idea of the astrology new year in terms of going into Aries energy, which is sort of this violent force of like breaking forth into this what am I going to claim? What am I going to go after? What do I need the courage for, the bravery for, and there's going to be a lot of like a shifting into that, right? So right now is a little bit of the, what do I need? What's happening? What am I intuiting? And then what is that? It's almost like the gates open, and it's like, it's time to be bold and brave and to go for it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, first I want to thank both of you for being here. This conversation was so rich and fun and went in so many directions I couldn't have anticipated. And I want to remind everybody at home to like this video, continue to leave comments, share it with your friends. Go check out Dr. Joey and Dr. Tamsin's work. I have their socials and their website links in the YouTube text box, the show notes. So please check that out. Follow them on socials as well. So before we say goodbye, I wonder if either of you have any last words that you'd like to share with the audience. Or any wisdom to impart.
Maybe you can go, Dr. Joey. I'm still thinking.
Oh, well, I almost feel like I ended on my last piece or the shift of the energy. But I will say, I agree, Dr. Tams. It's been wonderful sitting here and having this conversation and, looking at it from different perspectives, but talking about the feminine and the masculine, like talking about what's the merging, what are we holding, what are we changing, what's being undone, and talking about, the shifting of crone to the tigress energy. Like, I love that. I think there's going to be a lot more shifts and undoing to things we've been attached to and ideas of who we think we are individually and who we think we are collectively. And I think we're going to see a breakdown of that narrative happen. I think it's both scary and exciting. So I'll end on that.
Yeah, I'll add to that. As we're talking about endings, I think the one thing that I've been trying to remind people is that, yeah, it is exciting, and also maybe challenging and frightening, but I think we also need to spend time grieving and having that closure. And we live in a culture where we don't know how to grieve properly. And there is some sacredness to sitting in grief and feeling that grief and moving through it and really honoring these feelings that may be uncomfortable and not just rush through it. And so maybe before, I'm already mentally noting March 20th, April, to spend time, slow down, grieve properly, honor that sacredness, because that is going to really be the thing that carries you over. If horse year expose things, we need to properly grieve and end that chapter with respect and dignity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Dr. Andrea, Yeah, really, thank you. All right, so we'll wrap up here officially, and thank you everybody at home. Again, please like, subscribe to the channel, leave comments. I'll pass them on to Dr. Joey and Dr. Tamsin. And everybody here on the Zoom, thank you so much. Please stay on for a minute so I can just debrief with you before we say part our separate ways. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. It was a wonderful conversation. Okay. Okay, end stream is happening. End stream, end it. Your stream will stop immediately. Yes. Okay, it says the stream has finished.